Hi, um, this is my first video to YouTube, and it's going to be called Why I Left the Jehovah's Witnesses. I've thought a lot about making videos, and I wasn't really sure what I would do first. And there's so many topics and things that I want to discuss. Um, I can't even make a comprehensive list of them all because every day I think of something else and I would like to add it to the list. And it's not all in relation to being a Jehovah's Witness exactly, but it is just things that I've thought and learned and just life experience has taught me a lot of things. So I have a lot to say. And I figured after watching quite a lot of XJW videos that the best way to discuss to make a video for your first video seems like the best way is to make one about why you left, because a lot of people who are looking into being a witness or studying with witnesses might happen to come across these types of videos. These tend to be the most common ones when you look up witnesses on YouTube. Why I Left the Jehovah's Witnesses tends to be a very common title. And for me, the answer to that question isn't easy. It's not one specific reason. It involves some background. So I'm gonna try to explain why I left in a very simple way, without getting into too much detail, because I don't want this video to be really long. Okay, so how do I start, or do I begin? Well, first of all, I'll just say that I was raised in the witness organization. From the time I was 2 years old, my parents were baptized when I was 2, so I don't really remember any normal way of life prior to that. This was my normal. Being a witness was normal for me. So I didn't know what it was like on the outside. And there were times growing up when I kind of wondered, you know, I kind of, I would ask myself a question occasionally when I was younger, and just to see, it was just an honest question. And in my head, I'd answer honestly. Of course, I would never tell anybody what my answer to this question was, but I'd ask myself, okay, if, I could do this thing that, the witnesses don't agree with or is frowned upon, if I could go and do this without anyone finding out, would I do it? And a lot of times my answer to the question was, yeah, I would, if I could. If I was allowed to, I would love to try these things that I'm not allowed to do. So if I could do it without anyone knowing, my parents or the elders or my friends, then there were things that I definitely wanted to do, and I wanted to experience life. But I didn't allow myself to do a lot of things. So basically, I should have really thought about how I would start this off. So I'm just gonna cut to the chase and say that when I was 19 years old, I was disfellowshipped. I had been reinstated before leaving eventually, so I will tell you kind of how that story happened. So I was talking to a guy online when I was like 16, and it started out really, innocently at first. I just really enjoyed talking to people, and a lot of the time, actually, I would witness to them online, which was really funny. I would tell them I was a Jehovah's Witness because I didn't want to give Jehovah a bad name. There's one of his followers online in chat groups, and I thought that if I said directly that I was a witness, that might reflect negatively on the organization. But if I, just told them, my thoughts on things based on witness thoughts, you know, because we all have to think the same thing. You can't be an individual. So if I told them how I viewed the world and stuff based on the Bible or just witness beliefs in particular, that would plant seeds, right? And then I wouldn't have to tell them I was a witness if they were sincere people. Witnesses would come to their door and they like what they heard, and I would have planted the seed, right? So I used to do that. I really did. But I also just really like talking to people, and to be honest, my main reason to go on to chat groups or whatever was because I was lonely. I was like 16 and I had never even innocently dated anybody, you know. And I think a really big destructive aspect of the witnesses is that they're not allowed to date, um, you know, openly, or they're not allowed to date until they're ready for marriage. And I think that's really destructive because by the time, when they're like teenagers, they just really want to, like, your hormones are raging. You really want to be with somebody. And so you say, yeah, I'm ready for marriage, which is a major commitment. And you just date whoever wants to date you. And you're just so happy that, and you're just so caught up in the lust that you don't really analytically look at this person. And a lot of times this person is totally wrong for you. Like, really, really wrong for you. And it's just the first person that you started dating. And you rush into marriage, and now you've had sex with them, so you're like, that's out of the way. And then you really just start thinking about who you're with, and you're like, wow, that was stupid. I'm stuck with this person forever now. So that's a very big problem with any religion that encourages young ones not to date, and really get to know each other. And you can't get to know each other because people have to be there chaperoning you all the time. So of course you're going to be on your ultimate best behavior. And I'm not saying that in the normal world when you go on like a few dates with people that you're not on your best behavior, because of course when you first meet someone you want to appear like, really well put together, and you don't show your vulnerabilities, right? But in the real world, when you get to know people, maybe in the beginning when you're all lustful, you allow yourself to experience and enjoy that lust, and then you really get to know this person through being open with them. Once a person has made out with you or other things, now they feel more comfortable with you. Hey, like, we've shared an intimate experience together. We can really be ourselves in front of each other, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you meet someone and you don't like them right away, and then you don't go on a second date, right? But with witnesses, it's like, oh, well, they're a witness, or they're a ministerial servant, so he's a good guy. So even though I didn't really like this little thing that he said, I'll just brush that aside because I'm so desperate to get married. Like, it's honestly what happens a lot. But in my case, I was 16 and I had never dated anybody. I had been like asked out a couple times in school, and I was always, no. I said no every time because I was scared. More so, I was scared of being caught. I didn't want, even though I kind of wanted, to experience what that was like, I didn't want to get caught. I didn't want to get in trouble, have to experience the consequences. and I didn't want my parents knowing and giving me grief, and it was just this constant psychological battle between the things you want to do and the normal things you want to experience as a growing person. You're becoming an adult, and you just want to experience your life, but you feel guilty about even wanting to do that, and you don't even allow yourself to really do it because you're scared of the consequences. You're scared of upsetting people. It's all about everyone else and not about you at all. So, um, basically, I was lonely. Nobody in my hall, my congregation, was expressing interest in me in any way. Because, of course, I mean, it might not have even been that nobody liked me. It could have just been that they were also fearing the same thing. They didn't want to get in trouble. They didn't want to do things. They didn't want to, date somebody secretly and then have the repercussions, right? Because as soon as you start dating as a witness, you are like hounded, monitored all the time. Like, it's ridiculous. The elders are on your case about how much you're texting this person, because texting is alone time, right? So you got to be really careful about talking to this person over text. I mean, it's crazy. You can't even just get to know somebody that way, you know. So I was just really lonely, and I wanted to experience love, and I was desperate to get out of my house, my very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just in shambles living conditions. I mean, the living conditions. I don't mean like, that was terrible. I just mean my family life wasn't the model Jehovah's Witnesses family life should have been, hypothetically. So I was just desperate, to get out, to find love, to escape, even if it was just, online into the virtual world and it wasn't real. So I started talking to a guy, and I didn't think it would last. I had talked to so many different people, and it wasn't like we all always talked forever or we considered ourselves in relationships or anything like that. But this particular guy I started talking to, and we stopped talking for a period of time, and then I don't know, maybe like 6 months later, I think he messaged me or emailed me again or something. I don't really remember. But we started talking again, and then at that point it was just like we just continued talking and considered ourselves to be in a relationship. And yeah, anyway, it made me feel good, basically. I felt liked and appreciated. And when you're a witness, you don't really have any self-confidence. Um, you're just constantly beating yourself up because you're not living up to the standards that you're supposed to be living up to. I mean, I always felt guilty about the most ridiculous things. So even though I was a really good person, and I still am, witnesses might not agree, but I'm a really good person, and I care a lot about people. I have a lot of empathy. You don't really value your own good qualities. You don't see yourself in a good way. You see yourself as, every time you look at yourself, you're looking at, what can I do more for Jehovah, which is really just for the organization. So you're always beating yourself up. So for a change, it was like, it was like some self-therapy, having someone say they liked me and I was pretty and I felt valuable, I felt needed, liked. So anyway, it was just like, it just made me feel good. And we kept talking, and we would have arguments because of course he wasn't a witness, and of course, because we continued to talk for so long, he found out that I was a witness. And when we would have arguments about about differing beliefs, his family was actually Hindu, and I don't really remember if I don't think he believed in it. He just kind of went along because it was his parents' thing, but he was a very more, if I had to guess, it was more like an atheistic type of point of view slash agnostic, because he didn't say there wasn't God or anything like that. He never really argued it with me about evolution or anything like that. It was just more about, you know, how am I so sure? Because I was so ignorant and so arrogant about my beliefs, you know, because witnesses they just think they look at everybody else and all other Christians, even like they believe in they believe in the same things. They believe in the Bible. They have their own spin on the Bible, like every group does. There's going to be verses that, you know, somebody might take differently to another person, to another person, to another person, and that's how religion, you know, came about, right? But the point is, they look at other Christians like they're just, you know, false, fake Christians, and they don't really care about the Bible. Witnesses are the only ones that really care about pleasing God and doing things the right way. So you just have this arrogance about you, and you think that you have the only interpretation, and you have the truth of Scripture, and you know Adam and Eve existed. You know what happens when you die. Like, you know this stuff. There is no, I think this or I think that. It's, I know this is the truth. And that's how indoctrinated and arrogant and ignorant you are. So we would have arguments just because of my, you know, staunch beliefs, I guess. He would always ask me, like, how do you know? Like, nobody knows. Have you died and then come back? Well, nobody has, so how do you know? So we'd say stuff like that, and there were questions like I just couldn't answer sometimes. I was like, yeah, well, you know, I can't answer that question. I just know, you know? And yeah, anyway, in those arguments, I can really see how easy it was to be frustrated with someone like myself. Now, you know, now that I'm free from the small closed-mindedness that comes with being a witness. But at the time, I was just so sure, right? But anyway, so there was issues, and I guess because of the things that I would talk, let's just say, if I had stayed in the witnesses, I probably would have converted a lot of people, because I'm very, very good communicator, and I'm good at getting my point across and why something makes sense to me. I'm good at explaining things in a way that helps make sense to other people. So I was so sure about what I believed that I could explain it to somebody else in a way that they were like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. You know, if they believed the Bible, right? So I would have converted probably a lot of people had I stayed in. So my ex-boyfriend, eventually, he started studying. It wasn't really because I was so convincing. Maybe partly to do with that. You know, I piqued his interest maybe. But I think it was because I had, you know, started wanting to break up with him and stuff. And, you know, I saw that it wasn't really a good relationship. At the time, I thought it was because of my beliefs, and his beliefs were differing, so we had to, you know, break up. And that, in part, was true. But there was also some definite abusive aspects to the relationship that I didn't recognize at the time. Anyway, I wanted to break up with him. And after, you know, I suggested that, he then said he was going to start studying to be a witness. And so then, of course, I felt kind of like responsible for him making that decision. And I didn't want to just end it right when he decided he was going to learn the truth, right? Like, it was such a good thing. So So he started studying in his area, or so I was told. I mean, I actually am pretty sure that he did, because I, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure there was a time when he was on a study and he like let me listen. He like put me on speakerphone, or not on speakerphone, but I was hearing part of the study. So I was like, oh wow, he actually is studying, you know, the witnesses in his area. And yeah, anyway, he was pretty much just doing that to keep me on the leash, right? And I just was, and then of course I felt like if I had left him now, that would just be like the dumbest thing I could do, because maybe he's going to be a witness, you know. So I don't want to just leave him to do that by himself, because I can answer and help a lot of his questions, whatever. Anyway, so that went on, and you know, we continued to just argue, and I just started to see more and more that I didn't really want to be with him, and I couldn't pinpoint exactly all the reasons why. Like, it's so weird. I guess maybe a part of it was because I was in an abusive organization. I didn't recognize when I was in an abusive relationship. So I kind of just didn't feel right all the time with him, and wanted to break up. And every time I talked about it, he would just either guilt trip me into staying, or something else of that nature. So he knew, this will be another story for another time, but he knew that one of my best friends, who was a witness, had killed herself for reasons that I might talk about in another video. And he also knew that at the time I felt partly responsible for her killing herself, because I wasn't really there for her right before she did it. And I felt like maybe if I had been around, I could have prevented it, right? And he knew all that. And I might talk about that more later, so let's just not get onto that topic now. So whenever I talked about, you know, breaking up and stuff, he would say, you know, would get in this big conversation. He'd go on about how he was so worthless, and he should just, you know, rid the world of him because he's just, you know, terrible and wants to kill himself. And I would feel like, oh my gosh, like, I have to prevent this. I can't let him do this, you know. So I kept staying. And there was a time when I wanted to get away. I just didn't know how, because I had tried and it never worked. And I never really consciously came up with a plan. I didn't say, okay, I'm gonna do this to break up with him. But he obviously didn't live where I lived. He lived across the country, not all the way across. Anyway, so he didn't live where I lived, and I didn't have the feelings for him anymore that I thought I did at one point. So I was working, and there was this guy who worked with me, and I thought he was cute or whatever, and I kind of sensed like there was interest from his end toward me, so I kind of was like, you know, partially just wanting to experience life as an you know, growing, like at this time I think I was 19 or 18 or 19, and I had already met my online boyfriend at that time. He had come out for a bit. Oh, maybe I should have told you about that. Anyway, when I actually met him in person is when it became pretty obvious that he was very controlling, to a degree that I didn't like, you know, like as a witness woman, to some degree, you are like okay with a controlling husband. And I think that's a part of what drew him into wanting to study, because he knew my thoughts on the headship principle and how the family arrangement works, how the women have to be submissive and blah, blah, blah. And I think that was a part of what drew him to decide, hey, maybe this is a good thing for me to get into. But when I met him, I just remember there was a time we were eating dinner and in the hotel room, and I will, reiterate, I did nothing with him that I would have got disfellowshipped for the first time that we met. Obviously we had kissed and stuff like that, but and he was my first kiss, and I was like 19. Okay, but anyway, um, point being is I didn't do anything with him. I wasn't supposed to. But anyway, we were eating supper, and it was just like takeout. And when we finished, it was literally a case of, crumpling up the stuff and putting it in the bag and putting it in the garbage, because we were in a hotel. It wasn't like we had dishes to do and stuff like that, right? But we were watching TV and eating, and then, after I finished, I just kind of sat back on the bed for a little bit, and I didn't even think to myself anything really. I was just like, oh, whatever. I was just watching the TV and not thinking. Just finished eating, relaxing, whatever. And and he gets up and he throws away our garbage, which was literally like, it didn't take him more than 5 seconds, because again, it was as easy as putting the garbage in the garbage can. And then he looks at me and he's like, you couldn't have done that? Like, you couldn't have helped me clean up? Like, and he started giving me this lecture about how I should have helped him clean up and I should have thrown the garbage away. And I just remember sitting there, like, thinking, oh, what? Like, I was so weirded out. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like, that is how bad you are controlled when you're a witness. You can't even see when you're being mistreated. You're just like, oh, you're so apologetic, even when you really shouldn't be. And I felt bad about it. But then when I logically thought more about it, I was like, I kept brushing it aside. Again, another technique you're taught to do as a witness. If you ever have questions or doubts, you just brush it aside, and maybe I just don't understand this properly, and oh, or maybe I'll just look into this later. Oh, the Watchtower might come up with an article that answers this question later. And I did the same thing with him. I thought about it and I was like, that seemed a little weird. Like, it didn't seem right for him to lecture me about cleaning up. Anyway, and I just brushed it aside as like, whatever. It's terrible. So I realized, I don't really want to be with him. He was just very manipulative. And after, I met this guy I worked with, and he was, I'm, ex-boyfriend at the time, my boyfriend, was in his province again. And I was working with this guy, part of me just wanting to, now I had kind of experienced, like, I had already rebelled a little bit. I made out with this worldly guy that I met online. And now there's this other worldly guy that's like here and now. And I really don't have deep feelings for this other guy that I'm supposedly, dating. I just didn't want to leave him when he was studying, So this other guy's here and now, and I sense he likes me, and I, started texting him, and sometimes we would hang out. Not much, not often, really. The second time we hung out, I was actually looking after a friend of a friend's house. She wasn't a witness, just so everyone knows. It's actually, it was just a relative of a witness, and they were going on vacation or something, and I went and looked after their dogs and their house. And so I invited this guy over, and he came over, we made out. Again, nothing too crazy. And my boyfriend at the time was really concerned because I wasn't talking to him that night. he wanted to talk to me every night and know everything I was doing all the time and my whereabouts. And like my phone literally, it wasn't tapped, but it was, I had an app on there where he can see where I was all the time. So he would, question me if I had the 3G turned off or the data turned off so that he couldn't see my whereabouts. And he's like, where were you? You had your data turned off. Anyway, so I had this guy over and I just ignored the phone of my boyfriend because he wouldn't leave me alone, and the guy was coming over, and I was like, yeah, I just want to be alone, like whatever. So I turned my phone off to just hang out with this other guy. And then the next day, I called him, and he was all upset with me, and what did you do, and what were you doing? And I decided I would tell him what I did. So I told him that I was hanging out with another guy and that things happened. And then he, was really frustrated, angry with me, and started making me feel guilty. And I did feel guilty, but at the same time, I think I wanted things to end, and I was hoping that would be the breaking point. But instead it wasn't. It was even more of a controlling issue that happened after that. So anyway, I ended up not seeing this guy very much anymore. There was like one other time that we saw each other, and then my boyfriend made me call him and tell him while he was listening on the phone that I had a boyfriend and I had to break up with him and blah blah blah. So, and he even went so far as to butt in when I was talking to this guy on the phone and being like, you don't sound like you really want to do this. Oh my gosh, it was so embarrassing and just, anyway. So by this point, I really don't like him, and I'm just stuck with him, like, it's like no matter what I do, I'm stuck with him. And then this other guy that I had, made out with and stuff, he started spreading rumors around our workplace and started saying things that weren't true about how far we went. And he told me that if I didn't, he tried to blackmail me and said that if I didn't have sex with him, he was going to tell everybody what we did. So I was like really mad at that. And I was like, yeah, no, dude, like that's not going to work on me. To me, that just was so over the line. And I was like, okay, fine, go ahead, tell everybody, right? Not really caring at that point what the consequences were. So he did, he told everyone, and all this gossip went around. Anyway, and my boyfriend at the time, he knew the phone number of this guy now, and he called him and asked him how far we went, and this guy exaggerated things. And then my boyfriend called me. He's like, oh, we're over. And I was like, I felt bad because I wanted things to end, but I didn't want it to end with him like heartbroken. So I was like calling him and apologizing because now I felt guilty and I felt bad. Like I had hurt somebody, I did a terrible thing, I had cheated on someone. Yeah, I didn't want to be with him, but I shouldn't have done that, right? So I'm thinking all these things, and we end up right back together, and he tells me that I have to go to the elders. And so by this point, I should probably clarify. I had met my boyfriend the first time, right? And then I had cheated on him with this guy, making out. And then my boyfriend flew here again, like immediately after finding that out, because he wanted to, I don't know, see me in person after I did what I did, I guess, to see if I was really sorry or something. I don't know. And at that time, the second time that we met, we had sex because I felt guilty, and like I couldn't turn down his advances at that point because that would just make me look like I didn't want to be with him. It was so manipulating. Anyway, we had sex at that time. And then after that is when he found out from this other guy that I cheated on him with how far we went, even though he exaggerated the truth. And then he was like, I'm breaking up with you. And he was accusing me. He said that when he met me in person, he didn't think I was a virgin because it didn't hurt me when we had sex. And I was like, I was really mad because I'm like, okay, so now you're saying I'm not a virgin. Like, it's one thing to, like, I told you what I did. Like, I told him. I didn't really try to hide it from him. I told him what happened. Not every little detail, but I told him what he needed to know. And now he's saying I'm not a virgin. And I was like, no, I am. I was until, you had sex with me. And he was like, I didn't feel like I was a virgin. I wasn't in pain when we had sex, and I should have been if it was my first time. Anyway, I could see that there was no way I was going to prove to him that I was. So I was like, believe what you want to believe. Like, I know that I was a virgin, so whatever. Like, at that point, I was like, whatever. But I kept saying how sorry I was for cheating, and, like, I felt terrible. Like, don't kill yourself, because, of course, he was going on the whole I'm going to kill myself again. And, that wasn't really helping. So we had settled and agreed upon. He told me that, if I wanted his forgiveness, or if I really wanted to prove to him that I was sorry, then I should go to the elders then, But I actually suggested it, which was stupid. I was like, you know what? Like, I'll prove to you that I feel bad. Because I felt so bad. I felt like my life was spiraling out of control, and I was associating it with because I was sinning against Jehovah. And instead of really associating it with I was in an abusive organization and an abusive relationship, and I was just allowing myself to be controlled instead of making my own decisions, So anyway, I was like, yeah, then you should go to the elders. That'll really prove to me that you're sorry if you can, have the guts enough to confess. So I was like, fine, then I will. And I did. Thinking, really at the time, honestly thinking that going was going to help me. God was going to come back into my life. I thought Jehovah would have abandoned me or something. And I was going to get him back into my life and fix things. So I went to the elders the first time and told them. And they actually weren't going to. First of all, I told them about the guy that was local, that I did things with. That was the guy I worked with. And I told them the whole story, the whole truth. I went in there thinking, like, I'm telling 100% the truth, because if I don't, it's going to be more, Jehovah's going to persuade them to disfellowship me. So at least if I'm honest, Jehovah's going to know that, and he's going to move them to discipline me, justly in the right way and not harshly. That's what I'm thinking, because I'm thinking the only people that get disfellowshipped are people that are gross sinners and unrepentant. They're not sorry about anything they did, right? So I'm thinking there's no way I'm going to get disfellowshipped, especially if I'm honest. So I went in there and I told them everything, and I answered their very intrusive questions. And they asked me, what I had done to make sure this relationship with this coworker ended, and I had actually went through quite the extremes to make sure it ended. For my ex, of course, and more importantly, because I was very mad at this guy for trying to manipulate me to having sex with him. So I just didn't even want to see him. So I was gonna quit my job, and my boss convinced me not to quit my job and asked me what he could do so that I wouldn't quit. And I told him, I don't want to work on the same shift as this guy. And he's like, okay, so I'll change his work schedule and he's just gonna have to suck it up, right? And that's what happened. So I never actually saw him again. Occasionally I'd see him if he like came to pick up his check or something, but it wasn't like we had to work together or talk to each other. So anyway, I told the elders that that's what I did, and they were really, happy with that. Like I was really separating myself from this worldly, terrible man, right? So they were actually quite happy with that, and they were like, "Oh, is that all? Like, oh, is that all you did? Like, we hear about this all the time from young people, probably. Young people always go out and make out with worldly people occasionally, and as long as they stop and put those desires away, right?" But, and I was like, no, there's more, and that's when I got into about my online boyfriend, which turned into a second judicial committee. I explained it roughly the first time, and then they said we were going to have to meet again with 3 elders, because I think there was only 2 there. Maybe there was 3. No, yeah, there was 3. But I had to meet again for the proper judicial committee. And I will explain that in the next video. I kind of tell you how that went. And from there, what happened, and why I am here today telling you my story. Okay? So thanks for listening so far, and I hope you enjoy the video. And if you have any questions, you can leave it in the comments, and I'll try to get to them in my second video. Thanks. Bye.